The stars outside the ship window looked different when you were coming home 3 days early, Daeho thought, as his transport glided through the atmosphere of Taeyang Prime. The negotiations with the Void Collective had ended faster than anyone expected. The alien leaders had agreed to his terms without the usual weeks of arguing and threats. Maybe they were getting tired of war, too. Daeho stretched in his captain's chair and looked at the Crystal Palace growing larger through the viewport. Home. After 2 months of sleeping in cramped ship quarters and eating processed food, he wanted nothing more than his own bed and some real cooking. The palace staff would not expect him for 3 more days. He had sent no message ahead. Sometimes it was good for an emperor to see what really happened when he was away. His ship landed silently in the private bay beneath the palace. The guards, on duty, jumped to attention when they saw him step out. Their faces showed surprise and a little worry. Good leaders sometimes needed to arrive without warning. "Your Majesty," Captain Taejin said, bowing quickly, "we were not told of your return." "That was the idea," Daeho said. He waved off the usual ceremony. "I want to see how things run when you think I am not watching." He walked through the service tunnels instead of the main halls. These passages were meant for staff and supplies, but they would let him reach his private rooms without anyone seeing him. The walls were plain metal, nothing like the decorated hallways where visitors walked. But Daeho had grown up in these tunnels as a prince, playing hide-and-seek with the servants' children when his tutors were not looking. The tunnel led to a door near his bedroom. He used his personal code to open it. The hallway beyond was quiet. Most of the day staff would be in the lower levels now, preparing dinner and cleaning the public rooms. His private wing should be empty, except for the minimal security. Daeho walked softly toward his chambers. He wanted to check on Hanul first. His baby dragon had been sick when he left for the negotiations. The little creature had stopped eating and barely moved from its sleeping spot. The palace veterinarian said, it was normal for young dragons to have weak periods, but Daeho had worried anyway. Dragons were not pets, even baby ones. Hanel was his companion, chosen for him when they were both young. The dragon would grow to be large enough to ride between stars, intelligent enough to understand complex commands, and loyal enough to die protecting him. But right now, Hanel was still small enough to curl up in a person's arms, and still young enough to need constant care. He reached the door to his rooms and stopped. There was a sound coming from inside. Singing. Someone was singing a soft, gentle song in the old human language his grandmother had taught him as a child. The melody was simple and sweet, the kind mothers sang to help babies sleep. Daeho's hand froze on the door control. Who would be in his private chambers? And why were they singing? He opened the door very slowly and looked inside. What he saw made him forget to breathe. So Min sat on the floor in the middle of his room, her legs crossed and her back straight. The young woman wore her simple maid's uniform, but her hair hung loose around her shoulders instead of being tied back properly. In her lap, curled like a sleeping cat, was Hanul. The baby dragon was making a sound Daeho had never heard before. A deep rumbling purr that seemed to come from somewhere inside its chest. Dragons did not purr. He had read every book about dragons in the palace library. He had talked to every dragon expert in the empire. Dragons could roar, shriek, chirp, and make dozens of other sounds, but they did not purr like satisfied cats. Yet there was Hanul, eyes closed and scales shimmering with contentment, making that impossible sound while So Min sang to it. The maid's voice was not trained or perfect, but it was warm and full of love. She sang about stars and moonlight, about safe places and peaceful sleep. Her hands moved gently over the dragon's scales, not scratching or rubbing, but tracing soft patterns, like she was painting invisible pictures. Hanel shifted slightly and made a different sound, almost like a question. So Min stopped singing and looked down at the little dragon. "Are you hungry now, little sky?" she asked in a voice so soft Daeho barely heard it. "Let me get your food." She lifted the dragon carefully and set it on a soft cushion nearby. Hanul stretched like a cat waking from a nap, then looked up at So-min with bright, alert eyes. This was not the sick, listless creature Dae-ho had left behind. So-min went to the small food preparation area in the corner of the room. She came back with a bowl of something that smelled like meat and herbs. But instead of just putting the bowl down, she sat next to Hanul and held small pieces of food in her fingers. The dragon ate from her hand like a tame bird, making small, happy sounds between bites. When it finished eating, it butted its head against her hand, the way a cat might ask for petting. "Better?" So-min asked, scratching under the dragon's chin. Hanul closed its eyes and made that purring sound again. Dae-ho stood frozen in the doorway, trying to understand what he was seeing. So-min was just a maid. She came from one of the farming colonies where people grew food for the empire. She had no special training with dragons. She was not from a noble family with ancient bloodlines. She had no psychic powers that anyone knew about. Yet she had done something that dragon experts said was impossible. She had made a baby dragon purr. The sound of footsteps in the hallway behind him made Dae-ho step quickly into the room and close the door. So-min looked up, saw him, and went very still. Her face turned pale. "Your Majesty," she whispered, starting to stand. Dae-ho held up his hand to stop her. His eyes went to Hanul, who had noticed him now but showed no fear or excitement. The little dragon just looked at him calmly, then went back to nuzzling So-min's hand. "How long?" Dae-ho said quietly. "Has he been doing that?" So-min's hands shook as she picked up Hanul and held the dragon protectively against her chest. "Doing what, Your Majesty?" The sound. The purring. She looked confused for a moment, then understanding crossed her face. "Oh. Since yesterday, I think, when the fever finally broke. Dragons do not purr, So-min." "This one does," she said simply. Dae-ho sat down slowly on his bed, still watching So-min hold Hanul like a protective mother with her child. The dragon seemed perfectly comfortable in her arms, occasionally making soft, chirping sounds that sounded almost like conversation. "Tell me what happened while I was gone," he said. So-min looked nervous, like she expected to be punished. "Your Majesty, I only did what seemed right. The doctors said there was nothing more they could do. Start from the beginning." She took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice was quiet but steady. 3 days after you left, Hanul stopped eating. The kitchen staff tried everything. Fresh meat, different spices, even imported delicacies from the outer worlds. Nothing worked. Dae-ho remembered. The dragon had been listless for days before his departure. The veterinarians had assured him it was a normal growth phase, but he had worried anyway. "The next day, Hanul developed a fever," So-min continued. "Its scales became dull and started to flake off. Dr. Wu Jin said it was scale rot, a disease that kills most young dragons. He gave Hanul medicine, but it only got worse. Scale rot. Dae-ho had read about it in the old texts. It was like a plague that attacked young dragons, eating away at their protective scales and eventually killing them. In all recorded history, only a few dragons had survived it, and only with the help of powerful healing magic that most species no longer knew how to use." "How long was Hanul sick?" he asked. 5 days, So-min said. She looked down at the dragon in her arms. On the 5th day, Dr. Wu Jin told the staff to prepare for the worst. He said Hanul would probably die before morning. Dae-ho felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had almost lost his companion before their bond could truly form. But obviously that did not happen. "I could not just watch and do nothing," So-min said. "That night after everyone left, I stayed with Hanul. I had been caring for sick animals since I was a child on my family's farm. Maybe dragons were different from farm animals, but suffering was still suffering." She shifted Hanul to one arm and used her free hand to gesture. Back home, when animals got fever sickness, my grandmother would make special teas from herbs she grew in her garden. I asked the kitchen staff if they had any of the same plants. "They let you experiment on my dragon?" Daiho asked. He was not angry, just surprised. Palace staff usually followed orders exactly, with no room for personal initiative. Cook Jae-won helped me, So-min admitted. He said if the doctors had given up, what harm could it do to try something else? We found most of the herbs I needed in the spice garden. I made a weak tea and tried to get Hanul to drink it. She smiled slightly, remembering. At first, Hanul would not take it, but I held the cup near its mouth and let the steam rise. After a while, it started to lick at the liquid. Daiho watched Hanul, who seemed to be listening to the conversation. The dragon's eyes were bright and alert, nothing like the sick creature he had left behind. The tea helped with the fever. But Hanul was still weak and would not eat, So-min continued. I remembered what my grandmother used to do when I was sick as a little girl. She would hold me and sing until I fell asleep. So I tried singing to Hanul. And it worked? Not right away. But after a few hours, Hanul seemed to relax. The next morning, it ate a little bit of meat. Not much, but something. So-min's voice grew stronger as she told the story. I kept singing every day. Old songs my mother taught me, lullabies from my childhood, even work songs from the farms. Hanul seemed to like them all, and slowly it got better. When did the purring start? Daiho asked. Yesterday, when the last of the damaged scales fell off and new ones started to grow. I was singing a song about a bird learning to fly, and suddenly Hanul started making that sound. I thought something was wrong at first, but it seemed happy. Daiho looked at his dragon companion. Hanul's scales were indeed perfect now, shining with health. The creature looked larger than before, like the sickness had been holding back its natural growth. So-min, he said carefully, do you understand what you have accomplished? She looked confused. I helped a sick animal get better. Anyone would have done the same. No, Daiho said. They would not have. Dragon experts from across the galaxy spend decades learning how to communicate with dragons. Most never succeed, yet you have formed a bond with Hanul in just a few days. I do not understand, Your Majesty. Daiho stood up and walked to his desk. He pulled out a thick book and opened it to a page he knew well. This is the most complete text on dragon behavior ever written. It says here that young dragons only bond with one person in their lifetime, usually their intended rider. The bonding process takes months or years and requires careful training by experts. He looked back at So-min, who was stroking Hanul's head. The dragon was making soft, contented sounds. It also says that dragons never show affection the way mammals do. They do not purr, they do not seek physical comfort, and they certainly do not respond to singing. Maybe the book is wrong, So-min said simply. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maybe the book was wrong. Maybe everything they thought they knew about dragons was wrong. Daiho walked back to where So-min sat. May I? He asked, holding out his hands. So-min carefully passed Hanul to him. The dragon came willingly, settling into Daiho's arms like it had done many times before. But now there was something different. Hanul looked up at him with what could only be called affection, then turned to look at So-min and made a soft, questioning sound. It wants to go back to you, Daiho realized. Hanul knows you are its true companion, So-min said. But I think it also knows I was the one who helped when it was afraid and hurting. Daiho handed the dragon back to her. Immediately, Hanul settled against her chest and began purring again. Your Majesty, So-min said hesitantly. Am I in trouble? I know I should not have taken such liberties with your personal property. Property? Daiho repeated. He thought about what he had just witnessed. So-min, I do not think Hanul is anyone's property. And no, you are not in trouble. You may have saved not just my dragon's life, but changed everything we know about how humans and dragons can work together." He sat back down on his bed, mind racing with possibilities. If So-Min could bond with Hanul so easily, what did that mean for other humans? Could anyone do it? Or was there something special about her approach? "Tell me," he said. "When you were singing to Hanul, did you think of it as a dragon? Or as something else?" So-Min considered the question. "I thought of it as a baby that was scared and alone. Just like any young creature that needed comfort. Just like any young creature that needed comfort. Not a mystical beast or a powerful weapon, but a frightened child." Daeho looked at Hanul, still purring in So-Min's arms, and wondered if they had just discovered something that would change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. Word spread through the Crystal Palace like fire through dry grass. By the next morning, every servant, guard, and official knew that the Emperor had returned early and found something remarkable in his chambers. They whispered in the hallways about the maid who had tamed a dragon with nothing but songs and kindness. Daeho sat in his private office with his chief advisor, Jin Woo, who had served 3 emperors and seen many strange things in his long career. But the older man's hands shook slightly as he held his teacup. "Your Majesty," Jin Woo said carefully, "I must ask you to confirm what the staff are saying. Did the maid So-Min really make your dragon purr?" "She did more than that," Daeho replied. "She saved Hanul's life when our best doctors had given up, and the bond between them is unlike anything I have read about in any text." Jinwoo set down his cup and rubbed his temples. "Do you understand what this means politically? If other empires learn that humans can form such connections with dragons, they will either want to steal our people or destroy us entirely." Daeho had been thinking about the same thing all night. Dragons were among the most powerful creatures in the known galaxy. They could travel between stars without ships, survive in the vacuum of space, and their energy breath could destroy entire fleets. Most civilizations could only manage basic partnerships with adult dragons, and even then it required years of careful negotiation and tribute. "How many people know the details?" Daeho asked. "Too many to contain the information," Jin Woo admitted. Cook Jae-won helped So-Min gather herbs. Dr. Woo Jin saw the dragon's recovery. Half the cleaning staff heard Hanul purring yesterday, and Palace Guard Captain Tae-jin saw you emerge from your chambers with a completely healthy dragon after weeks of sickness. A soft knock interrupted them. "Enter," Daeho called. Captain Tae-jin stepped inside, his face grim. "Your Majesty, we have a problem. Ambassador Hyeon Soo from the Crystalline Federation is requesting an immediate audience. He arrived without advance notice and says he has urgent business that cannot wait." Daeho and Jinwoo exchanged looks. The Crystalline Federation was one of the oldest and most powerful empires in the galaxy. They had been allies with humanity for over a century, but it was an alliance built on careful balance. If they thought humans had gained some advantage that upset that balance. "Did he say what kind of urgent business?" Daeho asked. "He mentioned reports about unusual dragon activity in the palace, Your Majesty." So the news had already spread beyond the palace walls. Daeho was not surprised. Servants had families in the city. Guards talked to friends in taverns, and palace suppliers heard everything that happened in the kitchens. In a connected galaxy where information traveled at the speed of light, secrets rarely stayed secret. For long. "Bring him to the formal reception hall in 1 hour," Daeho decided. "Full ceremony. If he wants to discuss dragons, we will do it properly." Captain Tae-jin bowed and left. Jin Woo looked even more worried. "Your Majesty, how much should we tell him?" "The truth," Daeho said. "We have nothing to hide. So-Min helped a sick dragon recover using traditional human folk remedies and compassionate care. If that threatens the Galactic Order, then perhaps the Galactic Order needs to be examined." 1 hour later, Daeho sat on the crystal throne in the reception hall, wearing his formal robes and the crown of stars. Ambassador Hyeon-soo knelt before him, but his posture was stiff with barely contained tension. Hyeon-soo was a tall man with the pale skin and silver hair common to his people. His species had evolved on a world of crystal formations and reflected light, giving them an almost ethereal appearance. They were also known for their ability to sense psychic energy and their traditional role as mediators in dragon-related disputes. "Your Imperial Majesty," Hyun-soo said, rising from his bow, "I come with questions that require immediate answers. My government has received reports of unprecedented dragon behavior in your palace. Reports that, if true, could violate several ancient treaties." "What treaties?" Daeho asked calmly. "The Dragon Accords of 2387, signed by all major galactic powers, clearly state that no empire may develop weapons or advantages based on dragon exploitation. We have maintained peace for 300 years, partly because everyone agreed that dragons must be treated with respect and restraint." "And you believe we are violating this agreement?" Hyun-soo stepped forward. "Your Majesty, our intelligence sources report that a common human servant has achieved a level of dragon bonding that should be impossible. A bonding that allows direct emotional and psychic communication. If humans can do this with any dragon, at will, it would give your empire an overwhelming military advantage." Daeho kept his expression neutral. "Your intelligence sources are very efficient. This is not a matter for humor, Your Majesty. If what we have heard is true, every dragon in the galaxy could potentially be turned into a weapon for human expansion. The other empires are already discussing defensive alliances." "Against what threat?" Daeho asked. "A maid who saved a sick baby dragon by singing lullabies? Against the possibility that humanity has discovered a way to control dragons that bypasses all traditional limitations." The word control hung in the air like an accusation. Daeho stood up from his throne and walked down the steps until he was face to face with the ambassador. "Ambassador Hyun-soo, I want you to understand something very clearly. So Min did not control my dragon. She cared for it. She treated it not as a weapon or a tool, but as a living creature that needed help. The bond they formed is based on trust and affection, not dominance. The result is the same," Hyun-soo insisted. "Your dragon shows behaviors that our experts say are impossible. It responds to human emotions, seeks human comfort, and demonstrates attachment patterns that could be exploited for military purposes." "Could be or will be?" Hyun-soo hesitated. "Your Majesty, the mere possibility is enough to destabilize galactic politics. Other empires are asking if humans have been secretly developing this ability for years. They want to know if your diplomatic successes have been based on hidden dragon advantages." Daeho walked to the great window that looked out over the palace gardens. In the distance, he could see the dragon training grounds where adult dragons practiced with their traditional riders. Everything done the old way, with ceremony and careful distance. "Ambassador," he said without turning around, "let me ask you something. How do your people bond with dragons?" "Through the ancient rituals passed down by the dragon speakers. Offerings of rare crystals, meditation ceremonies that can take months, and psychic harmonization techniques that require years of training." "And how successful are these methods?" Another hesitation. "Most attempts fail entirely. Perhaps 1 in 100 candidates ever achieves even basic communication. Yet a human farm girl achieved in days what your experts struggle to accomplish in years. That is precisely the problem, Your Majesty." Daeho turned back to face the ambassador. "No, Ambassador Hyun-soo, that is precisely the opportunity. I do not understand. What if the traditional methods are wrong? What if dragons do not want offerings and ceremonies and psychic manipulation? What if they simply want to be treated with the same kindness we would show any intelligent being?" Hyun-soo looked shocked. "Your Majesty, dragons are among the most powerful entities in the universe. They deserve reverence, not casual friendship." "Why not both?" Before the ambassador could answer, a soft sound echoed through the hall. Purring. Daeho smiled as So-min entered through a side door carrying Hanul in her arms. The dragon looked around the grand room with curious eyes, completely unafraid. "Ambassador Hyeon-su," Daeho said, "I would like you to meet So-min and Hanul. Perhaps they can show you what we have really discovered." 3 days later, the Crystal Palace buzzed with activity unlike anything seen in decades. Ships from 12 different star systems had arrived, carrying representatives from every major galactic power. The great landing bays filled with vessels, of strange shapes and colors, each one bringing skeptical officials who demanded proof of the impossible claims. Daeho stood on the observation deck watching the arrivals with Jin-woo beside him. The older advisor looked like he had not slept since the crisis began. "The Void Collective sent 3 warships along with their diplomatic vessel," Jin-woo reported grimly. "The Silicon Empire brought their entire Dragon Research Council, and the message from the Crystalline Federation suggests they are considering this a potential act of war." "And the Dragon Speakers?" Daeho asked. "Elder Veltaran himself is coming. He should arrive within the hour." That was significant. The Dragon Speakers were the oldest organization in the galaxy, predating most current empires by thousands of years. They claimed to be the original mediators between dragons and other species, keepers of ancient knowledge about dragon behavior and customs. If Elder Veltaran was coming personally, the situation was more serious than Daeho had realized. "Your Majesty," Jin-woo said quietly, "it is not too late to reconsider this demonstration. We could claim that the reports were exaggerated, that So-min simply used advanced medical techniques to heal your dragon. And then what? Hide the truth forever? Pretend that nothing has changed? It would preserve the peace." Daeho turned away from the window. "Jin-woo, I have been thinking about this for 3 days. What if the peace we have been preserving is based on lies? What if dragons have been suffering for centuries because everyone is too afraid to treat them with simple kindness?" Before Jin-woo could answer, Captain Tae-jin approached with urgent news. "Your Majesty, Elder Veltaran's ship has just landed. He is requesting an immediate private meeting before the formal demonstration." "Bring him to the small conference room," Daeho decided, "and ask So-min to wait nearby with Hanul." 20 minutes later, Daeho faced the most mysterious figure in galactic politics. Elder Veltaran was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species. His skin had the pale, translucent quality of someone who had lived for over 2,000 years, and his eyes held depths that seemed to reflect centuries of accumulated knowledge. "Your Imperial Majesty," the elder said in a voice like wind through crystal caves, "we need to discuss what you think you have discovered." "What I have discovered is that my maid has a gift for caring for sick animals," Daeho replied carefully. "Do not play word games with me, young emperor. I am older than your entire empire. I was negotiating with dragons when your species was still learning to make fire." The rebuke was delivered calmly, but it carried weight that made the air itself seem heavier. Daeho inclined his head respectfully. "Then perhaps you can help me understand what has happened." Elder Veltaran walked to the window and stared out at the palace gardens for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Tell me exactly what your maid did." Daeho related the story as So-min had told it to him. The elder listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. "And now your dragon purrs and seeks her companionship?" "Yes. It responds to her emotional state? Shows what you would call affection?" "Yes." "Elder." Veltaran turned back from the window. "Your Majesty, I am about to tell you something that will change your understanding of galactic history. For 3,000 years, my people have maintained order by controlling the truth about dragons." Daeho felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What truth?" Dragons are not the mystical, distant beings we have taught everyone to believe. They are intelligent, social creatures who crave companionship and understanding just as much as any species in the galaxy. The purring your dragon makes? I have heard it before, many times. That is impossible. Every text says dragons do not purr. Every text lies. The elder's voice was heavy with what sounded like centuries of regret. We created those lies to maintain our position as intermediaries. If everyone knew how easy it was to befriend a dragon, they would not need the dragon speakers. The room seemed to spin around Daeho. You have known this entire time? Not just known. We have been actively suppressing it. Any species that discovered the truth was pressured to keep it secret or faced economic and political isolation. We convinced the galaxy that dragons were dangerous, unpredictable forces that required expert handling. But why? Elder Veltaran moved to a chair and sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 2,000 years. Power, Your Majesty. The Dragon Speakers became the most influential organization in the galaxy because we were the only ones who could safely interact with dragons. Governments paid us enormous sums for our services. We shaped treaties, influenced wars, determined which civilizations could have dragon allies. And humans? Daeho asked. What makes us different? Nothing makes you different in ability. Every species could form the same bonds your maid has created if they tried the same approach. But humans are the first to stumble onto the truth by accident and then refuse to hide it. The elder stood up and walked closer to Daeho. Your species has a reputation for stubbornness, for refusing to accept that things are impossible. When your maid saw a sick dragon, she did not think about ancient protocols or traditional methods. She simply tried to help a suffering creature with the tools she knew. The other species would not have done the same. They would have followed established procedures, called for dragon speakers, performed the proper rituals, accepted the expert's judgment that nothing more could be done. Humans seem constitutionally incapable of accepting impossible as an answer. Daeho thought about Somin's simple words. Maybe the book is wrong. It had not occurred to her that thousands of years of dragon expertise might be incorrect. She had just seen a sick animal and tried to help. Elder Veltaran, he said slowly, why are you telling me this? You could have maintained the deception. Because the deception is already broken. Your maid has demonstrated the truth in front of too many witnesses. Within months, every species in the galaxy will be experimenting with compassionate dragon bonding. The age of the dragon speakers as gatekeepers is ending. And you are willing to let that happen? The elder smiled sadly. Your Majesty, I have spent 2,000 years watching dragons suffer isolation because we taught everyone to fear them. I have seen magnificent creatures treated as weapons instead of friends, kept at a distance instead of welcomed into communities. Perhaps it is time for that to end. A knock at the door interrupted them. Captain Taejin entered with news that the formal demonstration was ready to begin. Elder Veltaran, Daeho said, will you help us show the truth to the other representatives? I will do more than that, the elder replied. I brought one of my own dragons for the demonstration. Korath is over 800 years old and has never shown affection to any being outside the speaker hierarchy. If your maid can reach him, it would prove that this is not just about one special dragon. Exactly. They walked together toward the great hall where representatives from across the galaxy waited to see if everything they believed about dragons was wrong. The great hall of the Crystal Palace had never held such a diverse gathering. Representatives from 12 star systems sat in carefully arranged seating that respected ancient diplomatic protocols. The air hummed with tension and the quiet whispers of a dozen different languages. Daeho entered with Elder Veltaran at his side, followed by Somin carrying Hanol. The young maid looked overwhelmed by the grandeur and the number of alien faces staring at her, but she held the baby dragon confidently. At the center of the hall waited Korath. The ancient dragon was magnificent and terrifying, easily 3 times the size of a full-grown human, with scales that shifted color like oil on water. Its eyes held the deep intelligence of centuries, and when it breathed, small sparks of energy flickered between its teeth. This was what most species thought. All dragons were like, powerful, distant, and dangerous. Ambassador Hyun-Soo stood and addressed the assembly. "We are here to witness a claimed demonstration that a common human can form emotional bonds with dragons using nothing but kindness. If proven true, this ability could destabilize the balance of power that has maintained galactic peace for centuries." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The representative from the Void Collective, a being of living shadow in a containment suit, spoke in a voice like grinding metal. "If humans can weaponize dragons through emotional manipulation, we must consider defensive measures." "This is not about weapons," Daeho said firmly. "This is about understanding." Elder Veltarin stepped forward. "I present Korath, bonded to me for 400 years through traditional dragon speaker methods. Korath has never shown affection to any being outside our established hierarchy. If the human girl can reach him, it will prove that compassionate. Bonding is possible for any species willing to try." So-Min looked up at Daeho nervously. "Your Majesty, what if I cannot do anything? What if it only worked with Hanyul because he was sick and needed help?" "Then we will have learned something important," Daeho said gently. "Just be yourself, So-Min. Treat Korath the way you would treat any creature you wanted to help." She nodded and walked toward the ancient dragon, still carrying Hanyul in her arms. The baby dragon was making soft, chirping sounds, as if trying to encourage her. Korath watched her approach with eyes that missed nothing. When she was still several feet away, the great dragon's head lowered until it was level with hers. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. "Hello, Korath," So-Min said quietly. "You are very beautiful." The dragon blinked slowly, then made a sound that was part rumble, part sigh. It was not threatening, but it was not welcoming either. Just curious. So-Min set Hanyul down carefully on the floor beside her. The baby dragon immediately trotted toward Korath without fear, chirping what sounded like greetings. Korath lowered its great head even further and sniffed delicately at the little dragon. "I think Hanyul likes you," So-Min said with a small smile. "He is very friendly. When he was sick, he was afraid of everyone except me, but now he trusts easily." She took a step closer. "May I touch you, Korath? I promise I will be gentle." The ancient dragon studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly it lowered its head until its snout was within reach of her hands. So-Min reached out carefully and placed her palm against the dragon's scales. They were warm and smooth, like polished stone that had been sitting in sunlight. Korath's eyes closed. "Your scales are magnificent," she said softly. "How long have you lived? You must have seen so many wonderful things." She began to move her hand in gentle circles, the same way she had petted Hanyul. "Do you ever get lonely, being so powerful and wise that everyone is afraid to be your friend?" Something changed in Korath's expression. The ancient eyes opened and focused on So-Min with an intensity that made several representatives shift nervously in their seats. Then Korath made a sound that silenced the entire hall. It was deep and rumbling, rising from somewhere in the dragon's massive chest. It was the sound Hanyul had made in Daeho's chambers, but deeper and richer, like a great cat's purr, amplified by centuries of life. "Oh," So-Min breathed. "You do get lonely, don't you?" She moved closer until she could rest her forehead against Korath's snout. The ancient dragon's purring grew louder. "It is all right," she whispered. "You do not have to be alone anymore." Elder Veltarin stared in shock. "In 400 years," he said quietly, Korath has never made that sound for me. The representative from the Silicon Empire, a being of crystalline structure and pure logic, spoke with something like awe in its electronic voice. The dragon's biometric readings indicate complete relaxation and emotional contentment. This should not be possible with an unfamiliar entity. Somin began to hum softly, the same melody she had sung to Hanul. Korath's eyes closed again, and the great dragon settled onto the floor like a cat curling up for a nap. Little Hanul scrambled up onto Korath's back and curled into a ball, adding his own small purr to the ancient dragon's deeper rumble. "How?" Ambassador Hyeon-su asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. Somin looked up from where she sat beside Korath's great head still gently stroking the dragon's scales. "I just treated him like I would treat any creature that seemed sad and alone. Dragons may be powerful, but I think they have the same feelings as the rest of us." Elder Veltarin walked closer to his dragon companion. "Korath, is this what you wanted all along? Simple friendship instead of formal respect?" The dragon opened one eye and looked at the elder, then made a soft, chuffing sound that might have been laughter. "I have been so foolish," Veltarin murmured. "We all have." Dai Ho stepped forward to address the assembly. "Representatives of the galaxy, you have seen the truth. Humans have no special power over dragons. We have simply discovered that dragons respond to the same kindness and respect that any intelligent being deserves." The representative from the Void Collective rose from its seat. "This changes nothing. If humans can bond with dragons easily while other species cannot, it still creates an imbalance. But other species can," Somin said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "There is nothing magical about what I did. I just paid attention to what Korath needed and tried to provide it." She stood up, leaving her hand on the dragon's head. "Elder Veltarin, you said you have known Korath for 400 years. Have you ever just sat with him without any ceremonial purpose? Have you ever asked him about his feelings or shared your own?" The elder looked embarrassed. "We maintain proper respect and distance in all our interactions." "Maybe," Somin said gently, "that is the problem." She looked around at all the alien faces staring at her. "Back on my family's farm, we learned that animals respond better to genuine care than to formal training. Maybe dragons are the same way. Maybe they have been waiting for centuries for someone to treat them as friends instead of weapons or mysteries." The crystalline representative spoke again. "Are you suggesting that we abandon thousands of years of established dragon protocols?" "I am suggesting that you try something new," Somin replied. "What do you have to lose?" Elder Veltarin knelt beside his dragon and, for the first time in 4 centuries, simply placed his hand on Korath's side without any ceremonial purpose. The dragon's purring grew even louder. "She is right," the elder said to the assembly. "We have been approaching dragons with fear and formality when all they wanted was understanding and companionship." Ambassador Hyeon-su looked troubled. "Even if this is true, how do we implement such a change? How do we restructure galactic society around a completely new understanding of dragons?" Daeho had been thinking about this question for days. "We start with education. Somin, would you be willing to teach others what you have learned?" The young maid looked startled. "Me? Teach ambassadors and officials?" "Why not? You are the expert now." Somin looked down at Korath, who opened both eyes and gazed at her with unmistakable affection. "If it would help other dragons find friendship instead of loneliness, then yes, I would be honored to try." 6 months later, the first interspecies Dragon Friendship Academy opened on Taeyang Prime. Representatives from every major civilization came to learn Somin's methods of compassionate dragon bonding. The curriculum was simple. Treat dragons as intelligent beings capable of emotion. Offer genuine friendship instead of formal respect. and never be afraid to show kindness. Daeho stood in the academy's main courtyard, watching Somin lead a class that included beings from a dozen different worlds. Hanul had grown considerably and now flew short distances between the students, chirping encouragement. Korath served as a gentle giant that new students could practice with, patient and kind. With even the most nervous aliens, the galaxy was changing. Ships throughout the Empire now carried dragon companions who worked as partners rather than servants. Diplomatic missions succeeded more often because dragons could sense genuine intentions and help build trust between species. And the ancient fear that had kept dragons isolated for millennia was finally beginning to fade. Jinwu approached with the daily reports. "Your Majesty, the Crystalline Federation has officially requested to establish their own branch of the Academy. The Void Collective wants to send their entire diplomatic corps for training." And the dragon speakers? Elder Velteran has dissolved their organization. He says their purpose was always to help dragons,